This is about to be the saddest I told you so moment I've had on this channel. I really wanted to be wrong about Arc. For those who aren't in the know, I made a bold switch last year where I finally moved off of Chrome in favor of a new browser, Arc, that I found to be a really good experience. It fundamentally changed what I expect from a browser and was awesome to use. And I know a ton of people, including many watching this video right now, made the move to Arc either before my video or as a result of it. And to those who did, I'm sorry. I really didn't think they would pull the rug out from under us quite how they did. And to the few of you who were really mad at me when I pointed this out, told you so. Okay, no, I don't want to do that. But in reality, I was, if anything, not harsh enough about the way browser company was treating Arc and its users, because they just published an article, their letter to Arc members. And it confirms basically everything I was worried about. Has a big discussion on the open source portion and whether or not they're going to open source Arc, and effectively confirms the end of the browser that people thought would be totally fine and well-maintained going forward, even if they're doing something else. I want to talk about what the hell went wrong here, why I think browser company actually did it, how much the VC and investor world screwed over this browser that I love, and where we can all go now as a result. But as you guys know, I'm not being paid by any of these people to talk about this stuff. If anything, browser companies more likely to block me than talk to me, even though Josh did promise me we would do a call and then just canceled it twice. Yeah. As such, someone's got to pay the bills. So a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right into the drama.
I think it's fair to say that AI's had a pretty big impact on our industry. There are two particular impacts that I have noticed. Small teams can ship way more code way faster, which is awesome. I love that. And because these small teams are shipping such good stuff, there are more big companies and enterprises interested in using tools by smaller startups, like our own at T3 Chat. I cannot tell you how many enterprises we have that are trying to figure out what it looks like to integrate T3 Chat with their services. But there are a couple things we need to get right first, and that's where today's sponsor comes in. WorkOS is here to make your app enterprise ready. They're an auth platform, but they're so much more than that. Radar is one of my favorite things they've introduced recently. Think of it like CAPTCHAs, but way less bad, and I've been through it with CAPTCHAs recently. One of the problems with AI is that there are way more bots trying to break into accounts, go through CAPTCHAs, and steal information they're not supposed to have. Radar's here to help protect you, and it's just a switch you turn on as a WorkOS user. The admin portal is another one of those things that's essential for the enterprise deals. Instead of having a ton of back and forth dealing with SAML, Okta, and all the weird process around auth with the IT team at this other company, you just send them a link to the admin portal and you're done. It's so much nicer. I've done this stuff when I was at Twitch. It is not fun at all. The best part's the price. 1 million users for free. That's insane. If you want to bring your app to enterprises, WorkOS will make it way easier. Check them out today at soydev.link/WorkOS.
Let's dive right in. Dear Arc members, you're probably wondering what happened. One day we were all in on Arc, then seemingly out of nowhere, we started building something new. Dia. From the outside, this pivot might look abrupt. From the outside, it didn't look, it felt. It was pretty egregious, actually. Arc had real momentum. People loved it. But inside, the decision was slower and more deliberate than it may seem. So I want to walk you through it all and answer your questions. Why we started this company, what Arc taught us, what happens to it now, and why we believe Dia is the next step. So here are all the different parts. This is the what would we do differently if they were to start it all from the beginning. The first point is they would have stopped working on Arc a year earlier. Funny enough, I still would have just barely got into Arc and would have started using it like a month before they announced it based on these timelines. Yeah. But this also confirms they have actually fully stopped working on Arc. Remember when previously people said, oh, they're just not adding new features. They're going to maintain it. They're going to take great care of this browser. This browser that for the last 6 months has eaten my very, very good performing battery on my MacBook in 2 hours instead of 10. No, they're not. They are not taking care of this browser at all. And to those poor people who were trying to use Arc on Windows, I'm sorry, that's not a thing at all anymore. Everything we ended up concluding about growth, retention, and how people actually used it, we had already seen in the data. We just didn't want to admit it. We knew, but we were just in denial. Second, I would have embraced AI fully, sooner and unapologetically. The truth is that I was obsessed. I'd stay up late after my family went to bed, just playing with ChatGPT, not for work, just out of sheer curiosity. But I felt embarrassed. I hated so much of the industry hype and how I was contributing to it. The buzzwords, the self-importance. It made me pull back from my own curiosity, even though it was real and deep. You can see this in how cautious the Arc Max rollout was. I should have embraced the inspiration sooner and more boldly. We'll talk about all that in just a bit. If you go back to the Arc 2 video where we announced they were going to bring in AI, it ends with a demo of a prototype that we call Arc Explore. The idea is basically where Dia and a lot of other AI native products are headed now. It's not to say we were ahead of our time or anything like that, just to say our instincts were there long before our hearts caught up. And then the third point in what they would do differently is that he would have communicated very differently. Yes, you screwed up the comms so bad on this. You also burned a huge bridge with me. The way you talked shit on me as one of your biggest supporters for being concerned about your move, after I got you an unbelievably large number of users by talking about your thing and making a whole dedicated video about why I liked it. To be clear, I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm trying to make it about people like me, enthusiasts that didn't just bet on your browser as their browser of choice, but brought others along with them. This hurts them too. You didn't just hurt your reputation with this, Josh. You hurt mine. People take my recommendations less seriously because you betrayed your core users. And if you don't have a way to calmly, properly make them feel heard with that, to sympathize with them because you're too busy worrying about yourself and your future, you should not expect long-term supporters. You are not going to have people who were dedicated Arc users becoming Dia advocates. Anyone who shows up to advocate for Dia is someone who didn't use Arc, because the people who were in it feel too burned and don't trust you anymore due to how badly you biffed the comms here. You claim that you care so much about the people you build for, but you did not behave as such at all. A few years ago, a mentor told me to put a sticky note on my desk that said, "The truth will set you free." If I regret anything most, it's not using that more. This essay is our truth. It's uncomfortable to share, but we hope you can feel it was written with care and good intent. A lot of people speculate this was written by AI because of the large number of M dashes throughout it. I don't read this as an AI post. I have read a lot of things AI wrote. It doesn't read like that. It's a little too personal to feel particularly AI generated, but these characteristics do make it feel a little more artificial too, so I understand why people are upset. I'll be drawing out my thoughts as we go, but we need to break down why they built it in the first place. In order to answer your real questions, why we pivoted to Dia, whether we can open source Arc, and more, I need to share a bit of background from the past. It informs what is possible and not possible today. At its core, we started the browser company with a simple belief. The browser is the most important software in your life, and it wasn't getting the attention it deserved. This is a particularly funny thing to say when you deprecated the browser that was the thing that made most people like your company. You recognize how important the browser is to people, and then you threw it and with it them away. It's pretty absurd. In 2019, it was already clear to us that everything was moving into the browser. My wife, who didn't work in tech, was living in desktop Chrome all day. My 6-year-old niece was doing school entirely in web apps, almost certainly through a Chromebook. The macro trends all pointed the same direction too. Cloud revenue was surging, breakout startups, yada yada. Everything was moving to the browser. And we see this with the crazy revenue of different cloud companies and the amount of money they're making from their clouds. Even back then, it felt like the dominant operating system on desktop wasn't Windows or Mac, it was the browser. Chrome and Safari still felt like the browsers that we grew up with. They hadn't evolved with the shift. Yep. And it took me a bit to accept too. Things that I really liked, like the sidebar, which I now live on and can't really imagine life without, even though I'm trying out Helium, which doesn't have it, and it kills me because I miss the sidebar so much. Things like the peak behaviors, things like having more vertical real estate and a nice view where you're just using the things. Having actual dedicated profiles you could swap between easily. It made life much better, and a lot of these ergonomic wins are great. You might have noticed I'm not using Arc. I'm using Zen, which has all of the things I liked and none of the things I didn't use. The big thing they call out here is that they wanted you to think of Arc as yours, and they felt like Arc was falling short of that aspiration. They refer to what they call the novelty tax problem, which is people loved Arc, but it was too different and it had too many different things to learn, and those things didn't give you a big enough benefit. The piece they call out here is that their retention was really strong if you stuck around for a few days. So if you used it for 3 days, the likelihood you were still using it in 6 months was very high. If you only used it the first day and then stopped, the likelihood you came back was near zero. And that is scary. If you look at the retention numbers for something like T3 chat, Once someone sends a message, there's like a 50% chance they sign in. Once they have signed in, there's an 80% chance they're still sending messages in T3 chat 3 months later. Our numbers are crazy. And that's because it's ergonomics they're already used to. It's behaviors they already know how to do. And once they have started, they get it, they're in. But if there's more things they have to learn before they see the benefit, the likelihood they make the dive is lower. And this is the problem that they ran into. For every 100 users who tried Arc, 10 would stick with it. And the likelihood they could turn those 10 into money was low. And the thing he doesn't mention here, but he did mention in the original video, I'm going to call it the mom problem. What the hell am I referring to? This is something that you either felt it or you haven't. If you've ever built a thing, man, it'd be really cool if my mom used this. I remember when I first started Ping, which if you're not familiar with, it was a video call service for content creators to do live collaborations. The goal of Ping was to make it way easier for me to bring a guest on my stream to do professional live content. In effect, the way it actually works is it is like a better, smoother, HD-focused Google Meet, where you send someone a link, they sign in, and now you can embed them in your OBS. My mom wanted so badly to understand Ping because she was so hyped for me to have just quit my job and dedicated everything to building this tool, getting into Y Combinator and all the crazy, wonderful chaos that came with it. Not only did I want my mom to use it, she wanted to. She signed up, she started trying it, and was very confused about why it didn't work on her iPhone because we were for desktop HD calls for content creators. So instead, she would just always ask me, like, who's using it? What streams can I watch? Because she wanted to see people using it in production. And I remember when Linus Tech Tips first used it for the WAN show, her like texting me every 10 minutes saying, it looks good, it looks good. It seems like everything's running smooth. How are your signups? How's all this? Because she was just so excited for me because she couldn't use the thing. She was just looking for ways to share my excitement. And that feeling was awesome. But it's nothing in comparison to the feeling of my mom sending me a screenshot of T3 chat and saying that this just helped her with a medical issue. It's an entirely different feeling where my mom trying to relate to me was fundamentally different from my mom benefiting from the thing that I built directly. And that feeling makes T3 chat just feel so much more real. It doesn't matter how many thousands of users Ping has or how many hundreds T3 chat has. It's actually quite the other way. What mattered was the realness of the vibe, that the thing I built isn't something my mom is trying to be proud of me for. It's a thing that she's actually benefiting from. The reason I bring up the mom problem is because Josh directly said in his video that Arc was not a product he could ever see his mom using. In one regard, this is a real piece of commentary on growth characteristics. If you can't get your mom to use the thing, that is a significant portion of the market that you can't get to do it. If the reason your mom won't use it is because it's too complex and doesn't benefit her, and she's not willing to push through the friction of it being too complex, even though she's your mom, that tells you that that entire demographic is not going to be able to use the thing. If it does benefit her, but the friction is too high and she won't use it because of the friction, you're screwed. That's why Dia looks a lot more like Chrome. It has the fancy changing the color of the tab based on where you are stuff, but the goal is to make it look more like Chrome because the goal is to make it more mom-friendly. The specific goal with Dia is to make it so that many more people can see the benefit of the browser with way less to learn. But that runs directly in contrast to what their previously stated goal was, which was make it feel more personal, make it feel like yours in your space. Making it more homogenous with what we expect and how things already work does not make it more personal. And it doesn't meaningfully improve the vibe of the browser feeling more like your home. And I will tell you, the reason I use Zen whenever I'm filming content is not just because it gives me more real estate when I'm live, it makes it feel so much better. And to this day, my favorite UX I've ever felt in a browser is Zen, because it doesn't have all the weird bullshit like the AI summaries and tab renaming and attempts to rethink how downloads work that just doesn't fucking function. It's none of that. It's just better ergonomics for browsing the web. And I have found it really pleasant for those reasons. But Josh saw the writing on the wall to some extent. He had raised a lot of money. He had great growth in a small niche, and he had no clear monetization path. This combo is brutal. Having a great looking curve where you have tons of users coming in, staying, the ones who stay hard, and you raised a bunch of money for your business with hopes of it becoming a more valuable business. You've now cornered yourself some amount where you need to find a way to grow way further, and you need to find a way to make money off of your users. The harsh reality is that nobody's going to spend money for a hotkey and a sidebar. And as they discuss later on in here, the other features like multiple spaces were only used by 5.5% of their users. 4.5%, not even, were using live folders, which I never even used, admittedly. And one of their favorite features, which was calendar preview, was only used by 0.4% of their users. Remember when they said they wouldn't fix the download thing as it affected less than 1% of their users? They spent a lot of time on the calendar preview that was only used by 0.4. I'm sorry, I hate Josh. He is such a fucking dirtbag, and the way he's handled all of this is just really inappropriate. I will leave the opportunity open. If he wants to DM me and apologize and schedule a call where we can have an honest conversation, I am down. But as far as I am concerned, he's a bad CEO, he's a bad comms person, and he's just an asshole. But he gets away with it because he talks really nice despite being an asshole. And yes, to those noticing in chat, this one is personal for me. This is where they were. And the most important piece is Josh wasn't proud. And honestly, I get that. You see the user growth, you want to make something your mom will use, so you do something drastic. The thing that Josh did is he put up a poll saying, which of these features would you be most okay with us removing? And the response was, we don't want any of these features gone. And then he realized, oh, the power users we have will never make something that average people want. There are compromises that can be found. One of my favorite pieces of software, he brought up video editing, not me, is Final Cut. And I think most normies could figure out Final Cut after a little bit, especially if they start with iMovie, which is the same base. And if they were to take an approach here where they have like Chromium shell base, and they build two things on top of this, where they build Dia, Chrome with AI, and they build Arc, power user browser, on the same base, this could have worked. And they pretended that this is what they were doing for a while. But in reality, this is what happened. Arc was the base, and they built Dia on top of it. Arc is now tech debt that they are using to build a new experience on top of. That is all Arc is to them. This is also why they will not open source it, which, if we go back here, they call out directly. Will we open source Arc? As we started exploring what might come next, we never stopped maintaining Arc. Absolute bullshit, but sure. We do regular Chromium updates, we fix security vulnerabilities, related bugs, and more. Honestly, most people haven't even noticed that we stopped actively building new features, which says something about what most people want from Arc. Stability, not more fun stuff. But it is true. We are not actively developing the core product experience like we used to. Naturally, people have asked, will we open source it? Will we sell it? We've considered both extensively. But the truth is that it's complicated. Arc isn't just a Chromium fork. It runs on a custom infrastructure that we call ADK, the Arc Development Kit. Think of it as an internal SDK for building browsers, especially those with imaginative interfaces. That's our secret sauce. It lets ex-iOS engineers prototype native browser UI quickly without having to touch the C++ parts. That's why most browsers don't dare to try new things. It's too costly, too complex to break from Chrome. ADK is also the foundation of Dia. So while we'd love to open source Arc someday, we can't do that meaningfully without also open sourcing ADK. And ADK is still core to our company's value. Doesn't mean it'll never happen. It means it'll never happen. And it's not happening. The issue, to put it more directly here, is that Arc has been gutted in favor of its kit that they used to build it. And they're reusing that kit in order to build this new AI browser. Now that the ADK is so core to what they are building, they are petrified of open sourcing it, and they're not going to. There is no world where they do that. What's extra funny is they actually regret a lot of the tech decisions they made with the ADK, and they talked about this more directly here. They originally built with TCA and Swift UI, and they're moving off of it because it's a mess for performance. I thought that Swift UI is what you use for performance, and React Native was really slow. But as I have discussed in detail, since I have a download folder with more than 100 files in it, whenever I download something in Arc and it pulls up the download tab, it basically freezes the browser because it can't render that many things in a list, and they were too lazy to put a cap on the number of things it would render. And then when I commented on this publicly after detailing it privately multiple times and being told a fix was coming and then no fix came, I was told that I was a niche user And that's why they weren't going to fix the download tab that made the browser unusable. The browser that I brought them a shitload of users for. This is why I don't like Josh. That's why they're not going to open source it. It's not going to happen. I've been saying this for a while. It was very clear why they were not going to open source Arc ever. I've seen a lot of people pretending they would do it. Hope you now understand that they absolutely will not. One other interesting thing here about the core feature bit. Switching browsers is a big ask. The small things we loved about Arc, features you and others members appreciated, either weren't enough on their own or they were too hard for most people to pick up. Sidebar's not that hard. Sidebar's not that hard at all. And I really like the sidebar. It would have been nice if I could have put it on the right, like Zen lets me do. But the sidebar's not that hard a thing to add and for people to understand. The peak features and the profiles are not a thing that's that hard either. In fact, Chrome rubs them in your face. It's just that their ergonomics suck in Chrome. But that's the key though. They didn't list how many people use the sidebar because it's 100%. They did say that most people only used one space, which is notable. But apparently, chatting with tabs and personalization features are used by 40% of DIA users. To go from 5.5% of your users using spaces to 40% using the chat with tabs sounds like a massive win. Except for the fact that that's the only feature that DIA has. So if you built this new browser all about AI chat, and less than half the users are using the AI chat, you're falling down the exact same trap, Josh. You're doing it again. And what makes this one way funnier is the power users that were the ones who would show up and then not use these kind of jank features. Those same power users are not part of the much smaller user base that you currently have with DIA. As chat has correctly pointed out, 40% of how many versus 5% of how many. DIA, they haven't published user numbers for either of these, but I am positive that DIA has significantly fewer users. As such, 40% of a niche base that is literally only there for the AI features. That's the only reason to use DIA is to chat with the browser. So the thing that is the headline features being used by 40% of users, imagine if Arc had less than 40% of users using the sidebar. Then Arc would be entirely dead. But this is your core feature and people aren't using it. But yeah, 40% is bigger than 5, so I'm sure you feel better, and that's what you're seeking right now, and that's very clear. You're seeking the feeling that you built something worth the billions of dollars that you raised. And I know that because I've been there. I have spent so much time toiling in metrics that don't actually matter across ping, across upload thing, across pick thing, across all of our stuff. I have done exactly what you are doing here, Josh. The reality is, once you build the right thing and you put a price tag on it and people pay for it, all the numbers you used to look at suddenly feel really funny because you realize none of them mattered in the end. I read back on my old investor updates and cringe because I would write things like, I'll just give an example. We increased our user retention from 16.4% to 18.2%. I would be so proud of this because I was looking for something to be proud of. But that bump out of 100 users doesn't fucking matter. Now my updates look like this. We doubled our revenue. These are different worlds. And once you are in this one feels like a joke. But when you are still in this one, you will do anything to feel like you're making progress. And as someone who has invested in a lot of companies and a lot of these updates, I've watched this happen so many times. I have watched companies write very, very detailed updates about where they think they're going. And I'm basically at the point now where I can tell how well a company is doing by the number of words in their investor update. The shorter the update, the more likely they're doing well. It's hilarious, but it's a very real thing. And the other problem that I see a lot, and I see in spades and droves here, I refer to this, and I kind of want to do a whole video about this eventually, cosplaying as CEO. What I'm referring to here is doing all the things that big companies do. I see this so often. When you see companies doing things like hiring a marketing team to make elaborate videos or poaching execs from other businesses, reinventing everything so they feel like they own it. Or my favorite, using Kubernetes when you have 10 users. These are all things I see a lot of. It's funny, somebody else said that in chat as I was typing it. I swear I was already thinking that and typing it before you put it there. But yeah, these traits and these behaviors are so common. Another big one is hiring a ton of people before you really have users. I've made that mistake. I'll be honest, I made a lot of these mistakes in my past. It's very easy to do. When you just went from having $10,000 in the bank to having $2 million in the bank because you raised a bunch of money, you feel like a real business. And then you start acting like one, but you're not a real business yet, and you shouldn't. And I think Browser Company went further than this than almost anyone I've ever seen, where they were spending a shitload of money on these super elaborate marketing videos before they even had a product. That was a huge part of why I was skeptical, because it felt like the whole thing was fake. Like they were pretending that they were Apple, but they didn't have a product yet. It's important to remember that Apple started in a garage, doing like door-to-door sales and showing off to computer nerds. You don't start with the fancy marketing video. You start by being real humans. And they tried a little too hard to do the marketing thing. And what's really funny is I talked to a lot of these earlier stage companies, and they want to do their own elaborate YouTube stuff, both because they see me as a YouTuber. They're like, hey, how can we use YouTube to grow our business? And also because they want to feel more legitimate, and having a YouTube video on a real channel of theirs that looks really nice will make them feel more legitimate. Every time I ask them, what company YouTube channels do you watch? Because the reality is no one watches them. And they would answer with one of two things. They would either say, I don't really watch company YouTube channels. That's a fair point. Or they'd say, I don't watch them much, but the one for the browser company looks really cool. I'd love to do something like that. You're falling for the same thing they fell for if you think so. This is a great tweet from Dax. This comes from a back and forth that I started where I was trying to explain to funny enough the Haskell world that the YouTube videos they were complaining not getting views weren't getting views because they weren't packaged at all. And you have to care about how these things are being shared in order for people to consume them. Dax had a really good take here where he previously thought people would just use things because like they were good. But if you don't have a way to properly share the value of the thing, it's not going to grow. You do have to find a way to do marketing. It isn't pay a bunch of money for a super fancy YouTube channel, but you do need to find something. But he had a really good reply here that somebody threw in chat that I want to call out. The thing with smart people is they can make a good case of themselves for basically anything, even things that they are completely wrong about. I cannot tell you how many fucking founders I have had explain to me that I'm wrong about YouTube when I'm literally consulting with some of the biggest YouTubers on the platform. And they don't even have a channel. They barely even watch YouTube. And they will tell me to my face that I am wrong about YouTube because it's a combination of Dunning-Kruger and smart people thinking they understand everything. And it's a very real problem. So I think Josh fell for one of the most egregious instances of cosplaying as CEO, going way, way further than he should have before they even had a product, much less users. And because of that, they just didn't operate well. That's also why they would kill a product that had actual users. And it's also part of why we as the public and the users of Arc feel so burned, because they had presented it like this big, legit, real thing that was going to be there forever. And then they took it away. And that contrast between this thing that feels really big and real and the reality of it being scrappy and poorly thought out contrasts in a way that is super conflicting and makes us as the users feel like shit. But the only way you can acknowledge that that's what happened is if you first acknowledge that this is what you did. But to acknowledge that this is what you did would require you to accept that you have made terrible decisions that have affected dozens of people's lives for years. The hardest thing I've ever had to do was accept that I had done this at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023. When I went through Y Combinator and we raised a bunch of money and we had numbers for growth that looked and felt really good, I hired up a team. We had 6 people. It felt like we were going places. And by the end of the year, I realized we had already peaked. We had saturated the Twitch market, and it wasn't a lot of money. We were making like $8K a month off subs for ping. It was clear that we had built the wrong thing, and the market wasn't getting bigger. If anything, it was getting smaller. And as such, I had a team of people whose jobs were to work on this thing that couldn't even cover one of their salaries. And accepting that sucked. And realizing I had to let go of those people that I should not have brought on in the first place sucked even harder. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I went out of my way to help all of them get the best opportunities they could afterwards. But it was still shit. It still sucked that happened and that I had to do it. And we trimmed down to just Mark and me and then grinded for 3 years until eventually landing on T3 chat. That went very well. We had plenty of stumbles along the way, but we were operating like a company much bigger than we were. And it's a common mistake. And it's the same mistake that Josh is making again and again. While in his heart, he knows they're still a small, scrappy startup. That's why he was willing to kill the product that had all these users. The next part, I think, really showcases how they are thinking about this. there's a couple things you can do to feel like the money you raise is worth it. Those things include explosive growth. It includes the cosplaying stuff, like hiring a bunch of people, because big companies have a lot of engineers. That means we need to as well. Big companies have fancy conferences talking about their product. They sponsor all these things, so we should as well. All of those things are you justifying to yourself that you deserve the money that you raised. And then there's more legitimate ones like massive revenue growth. And I'll specify explosive user growth and revenue growth as different things. But then one more big one, true innovation. Note that I put this in quotes. One of the reasons people invest in businesses that are early stage is the potential of them being the crazy big bet. Companies like Google, where no one thought that a search engine that automatically traversed the web would get better than curated lists of results. Nobody thought that ordering food via an app on your phone would outpace calling the restaurant to order it directly. Nobody thought any of these things would become the multi-billion-dollar businesses that they are. Nobody thought you would use an app to have a random person drive you around instead of a certified taxi driver. Those crazy bets are why people invest in these early companies, because if it turns out that that company is actually the way things will be in the future, you can make a shitload of money. It also feels really cool to build those things, to be building a thing that in 5 years will be how everyone does it. I kind of felt that to an extent being early on the full stack TypeScript thing in tRPC, watching everyone realize that full stack type safety, where you can autocomplete from the back end to the front end, was the right way to build like small to medium stage projects. Watching that happen was really, really powerful and rewarding and cool. To feel like I was ahead and then watch the industry play out the path that I had already went through myself was so cool. So if your growth is kind of garbage, you've reached the extent of your cosplaying, and you don't have revenue worth talking about, or any revenue at all, you're left with one option. And you will see this option referred to a bunch throughout the rest of this article. The part that was hard to admit is that Arc and even Arc Search were too incremental. They were meaningful, but ultimately not at the scale of improvement that we aspired to. If we were serious about our original mission, we needed a technological unlock to build something truly new. In 2023, we started seeing it happen across categories that felt just as old and cemented as browsers. ChatGPT and Perplexity were actually threatening Google. Cursor was reshaping the IDE. What's fascinating about both search engines and IDEs is that their users have been doing these things the same way for decades, and yet they were suddenly open for change. I don't agree with this framing at fucking all. ChatGPT is threatening Google, yes. Perplexity, it did very briefly, but I feel like their growth has plummeted. I'm just not seeing people talk about them as much anymore. Honestly, Perplexity feels like a feature, not a product. ChatGPT absolutely did this though, but they didn't do this by saying we're going to reinvent Google. ChatGPT was originally meant to be a tech demo of the capabilities of GPT-3 that accidentally went way further than anyone expected. And now Sam's trying to play catch up, turning them into a product company. See my video about them hiring Joni Ive if you want to hear more about that chaotic journey. Cursor was similar. Believe it or not, Cursor started as CAD software. They were trying to make a better AutoCAD type program. And then Copilot happened, and they were like, we want to do something like this, but better. And they were trying to iteratively improve on Copilot. Their goal was not to make this revolutionary new way of writing code. It was to improve what Copilot did and make it more and more powerful and capable. The companies you listed here are doing the thing that Arc did. They are iterating on a problem. And then you claim that they reinvented how we did it in a moment where people were suddenly open for change. I will admit that the open for change thing is very real right now. There are more and more companies, big and small, willing to try out new stuff than there were 3 years ago by large swaths. I've seen this myself with the people who are more willing to adopt the stuff that we build. I cannot tell you how many companies are interested in adopting T3 chat. It's kind of insane, and we're trying to figure out what that will look like going forward. But that's not these companies reinventing everything. That's not ChatGPT and Perplexity starting with the goal of being the new way we search for stuff. That's just where they end up after doing these incremental improvements. Years of incremental progress looks like an overnight success if you only look at the before and after. And when you're so locked in on your own company, it's very easy to look out and see things that way. But as someone who's close to people at all these businesses, you're just fucking wrong. This is where the venture capital part comes in. I'm going to take some controversial stances that people are going to be upset about in the comments. I know how this works. What's the role of VC here? A lot of people think that Arc is being killed because the investors demanded it, or they wanted more growth, or they wanted something explosive. The reality is that investors want the most likely chance to make a return on their investment, and blowing up your user sentiment is not a good path there. I would honestly expect the vast majority of the investors at Browser Company to have advised against doing this. That doesn't mean that the investors didn't trigger something bad at the company. They did. They triggered this whole thing. Once you've raised a whole bunch of money, it's very easy to start cosplaying as a CEO. And when the investors are expecting updates saying, hey, what progress have you made? And you have to fill out a report describing what you did for the last month, it feels a lot better if you say, we hired 3 engineers to work on platform compatibility on Windows, or we produced a new YouTube video that got 50,000 plays. All these things sound and feel really good. And that's why they're doing it. The accountability to the investors results in this. It does not result in this. I do not know any investors that would have recommended the path they took here. They might have encouraged parts of it, but they wouldn't have said kill Arc. They would have said turn Arc into something your mom would use. And the sentiment hit that you will take by doing this is not something any of the investors I have or have talked to would have recommended. And I, as an investor, never would have recommended this. And I'm saying that as an investor that told 2 different companies they have to kill their main product in the last 48 hours. So I'm not hesitant to tell people to throw away a product, but I am hesitant to tell them to burn trust with their users, especially if those users are the types of enthusiasts that you need to ride the coattails of to be successful. Would I have recommended Arc to my mom? No, but I would have recommended it to all of you guys. In fact, I did. And if they could have evolved Arc into a thing I recommend to my mom as well, I would have, but they didn't. They say the reason they didn't is these 3 key parts. First, simplicity over novelty. This example kills me. This makes me feel deep, deep pain as an instrumentalist. This is one of the dumbest quotes I've ever read in my life. Arc felt like playing a saxophone. It was powerful, but hard to learn. Then Scott challenged us. Make it a piano. Something that anyone can sit down and play. I'm going to run a poll. Can you play the piano? Yeah. Piano is really easy to play. I spent 13 years training on classical piano. I cannot fathom how someone can not only say that quote, but someone else can confidently regurgitate it as the thing that flipped their brain. Reading that quote is when I decided I had to make a video about this because I was just so... What? It's insane. Okay, so that was the first point. Simplicity over novelty with the worst possible example. More people, classically trained from the age of 5, crazy quote indeed. I started at like 6, 7-ish, if I recall. I don't remember well because I don't really remember anything before I was 8 years old. But I started very young as well and trained until I was 19. Then moved to guitar, then moved to electronics, and now I'm all over the place musically. My degree's in audio engineering, believe it or not. So I have strong takes on all of this. So yeah, that was like a slap in the face. So let's ignore that point because it's wrong. Point 2, speed isn't a trade-off anymore. It's the foundation. Dia's architecture is fast, really fast. Arc was bloated. I agree there. Arc was absolutely bloated. This is something we've been really cognizant of with T3 Chat. I wanted to make T3 Chat the fastest and nicest to use chat app you've ever used. And I'm pretty confident we pulled that off. I regularly have to go to other chat apps to test behaviors and try things. And every time I do, I am just floored by how slow and miserable they are to use. And it's nice to see people focusing on this, like Helium. Get to Helium in a bit. They built too much too quickly. With Dia, they're starting fresh from an architectural perspective. This is when they mentioned that they're moving off of SwiftUI because it's slow. Yeah. And then security is their third point. Dia's a different kind of product. To meet it, we grew our security engineering team from 1 to 5. You're sure that you didn't do that because you got pwned really hard by Eva that one time? So I'm pretty sure that's why you did this. I'm pretty sure you're lying again here. You're trying to retroactively justify the hiring you had to do because your security was such a shit show in the past. For those who weren't here when that happened, I have a whole video about how my browser got pwned because Eva from this community found an exploit with the way they were using Firebase to manage their extension things called boosts. They let you write custom JavaScript, where she could, given my user ID, which was very easy to get, trigger an update where she would add a boost or change a boost to run custom JavaScript on any web page because they didn't have Firebase configured correctly. It was a zero-click exploit where you could run whatever JavaScript you wanted to on my browser given just my user ID. One of the most horrifying exploits I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure that's why you had to hire more security engineers, not this new commitment for security in the AI-focused world. No, it's because you sucked at security. Anyways, to reread this, feature debt, tech debt, tech debt. That's why they're not turning Arc into this other thing. Instead, they're going to gut Arc, use its core, and then use that for the new thing. And more hilarious quotes here. I want to end by being frank. Dia is not really a reaction to Arc and its shortcomings. Imagine writing an essay justifying why you're moving on from your candle business at the dawn of electric light. I'm not even going to comment on this one. I'll let you guys do the work. Electric intelligence is here, and it would be naive of us to pretend it doesn't fundamentally change the kind of product we need to build to meet the momentum. At this point, I'm just thankful they didn't fall for the Web3 shit because it was very much the same thing. Let me be even more clear. Traditional browsers, as we know them, will die. Much in the same way that search engines and IDEs are being reimagined. No, that's not how this works. I just fundamentally disagree here. I also think that what they've done here with Dia is particularly funny because all Dia is, effectively, is an AI chat sidebar. Huh. Speaking of tech debt, I just tried opening Dia again to show the sidebar. Let's try it out, though. This is my sponsors page. Are relevant to me as an AI startup founder. This is so useful. This is marginally slower than if I had just read the page myself. Hey, if you guys want help making your AI faster, I do consulting, browser company, and let's be real, you very much need the help right now. Let me know if you want help unfucking whatever just happened there. We can choose how Dia answers. Oh God, the animation for that hurt me. This is the innovation. Did they stick with the stupid cursor thing? Can I click on the cursor and trigger the thing? Oh no, they got rid of it. That was like their big innovation, is they had the big cursor you could click on, and they got rid of it. I want to learn more about JavaScript. Guess they got rid of the autocomplete chat too. Is it literally just chat in the sidebar now? Oh, it can float. It didn't clear the chat after I sent it there. It's so bad. I'm going to update my Chrome Canary. Okay, there we go. You can see which pages you're sharing. What is this website used for? And that was literally instant. And if I go to t3.gg/sponsors, well, look at that. A way faster version of the exact same thing Dia offers built into Chrome. But this browser didn't crash when I opened it earlier. And we got the little button, you can't see it easily, but right there, to trigger that. If your goal is to make a thing that your mom will use, why are you copying the features that the thing your mom already has? You cannot beat Google because your ergonomic wins are not enough. You're going to lose. It's so obvious that that is the case. I find this all silly. There is one important point here. New interfaces start from familiar ones. I totally agree here. And I will even agree that Arc went a little too far with its changes to how we browse and the new features that it added. But I didn't want a bunch of features. I used less than a third of the features in Arc. I never even used Max. I didn't like it. I liked the better ergonomics and way of managing things in the window. I liked the sidebar. I liked the full screen view. I liked the spaces. I could even live without them. I know that because I'm living without them now in Helium. I'm unhappy. But yeah, it is what it is. They think AI browsers are the next big revolution, and they think their browser was not going to get them there. I think their browser was full of tech debt and regret and that sinking feeling that your mom will never use it. And it always feels better to just make a hard cut and start from scratch, even if you have to piss off hundreds of thousands of people in the process. I just had a jump scare. So for you, the viewer, I want you to guess, just like think about like the room with all the browser company employees in it. How big do you think that room is? How many people do you think are in there? Thinking like 5, 15. Just imagine in your head how many people are in the room of browser company employees. That's how many people are there. It's probably like at least 50. Decided to ask an actual product with revenue how many people were in that photo. About 95. Okay, 25 Flash thinks 80. I have to show off one of my favorite T3 chat features. You can retry and hover and pick different models. So let's ask 04 Mini how many people are in the photo. And if you want to try T3 chat, I'll give you a coupon code. For just $1, you can get your first month, and every other month's only $8 a month. Access to all these models and more. Use code RIP ARC for a $1 sub to get started. Oh God, it's reasoning. 68. Oh God, do I have to count this myself? People started hunting LinkedIn, and apparently the hard number for currently listed as employed by browser company, 136 associated members. If they have 136 employees, and we assume a relatively low base salary of $80,000 a year, again, relatively low, they are spending $10 to $11 million a year on the low end, just paying salaries. The Slack costs alone for that many people are bigger than all of our expenses for paying. That's crazy. That is so much money to be burning every single year. And if you want to make your AI a lot less slow, I'll charge you a hell of a lot less than that to fix your shit, guys. Just hit me up. I do consult. Just saying. Emails in my YouTube description, bio, whatever on my channel. Yeah. Just like napkin mathing. And by napkin mathing, I mean T3 chat mathing. This is a software development company making a browser. They have 136 employees total. They are based out of NYC. What is a rough profile of their yearly expenses for operation? Ignore user-related costs. Focus entirely on staffing and business costs, i.e. Slack subscriptions, salaries, etc. Oh, for many things, an average salary is closer to 150K. So 26 million on salaries, 1.5 million on rent, 200,000 on utilities, janitorial, etc. Slack, Atlassian, GitHub Enterprise, Zoom, etc. 300,000 a year, literally more than all of our costs for ping, T3 chat, etc. Other than maybe inference costs, those are getting pretty high. Infra, another 400,000. Equipment, 400,000. About 30 million a year. It's a rough estimate. They've been around since 2019. They've raised, publicly known, 128 million. They likely raised much more in a round that isn't publicly announced, because you often not announce the latest round until you are about to raise another. They have burned so much cash. This company is a money bonfire. That's all it is. Zen is built by like 3 people on the side, and it is a nicer browser than Arc. The only catch with Zen is that it's Firefox based. And it's fine if you're already okay with Firefox, you're going to love Zen. If you're not okay with Firefox because the dev tools suck, the rendering engine sucks, and all the other weird quirks of Firefox, you're going to have issues with Zen. But that's just the nature of Firefox. To cover the other alternatives, Vivaldi is one that I was using quite a bit. It's jank as fuck, but it's Chromium based and customizable enough to get almost where I wanted. I don't love it, but it was fine. But I've fully replaced even that now with Helium, which is still too early for me to confidently recommend. It's made by Wacko and another friend of his that I'm forgetting the name of. They're the creators of Cobalt, which is one of the best ways to rip content from various places. And I really trust Wacko, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. I have contributed quite a bit of money both to Zen and to Helium because I want to see both of these projects succeed. They are both fully open source. They are both teams of less than 5. They are both made by people who don't think that it's going to be the next massive thing. They're not trying to build a company out of it. They're trying to just make a more pleasant experience browsing the web. And they don't have investors that they're beholden to. I actually told Wacko directly, Don't let the money I gave you bias you towards doing what I want. Build what you want. If I have small things that you think are easy enough to add, cool. I love that. Appreciate it. But don't like change the direction of things based on me donating money to you. Because that's how I saw it. That was a donation. It was me contributing financially with the money that I have to make these things more likely to succeed. And in the end, what I've realized is that all I want is a browser that is Chrome-based, that is minimal, that doesn't have all the weird fucking quirks of Chrome, that ideally has a sidebar. But even then, Helium doesn't. It's fine. In the end, if I was to honestly recommend a browser to most people today, I'm not going to recommend Dia. I'm certainly not going to recommend Arc. And it's hard for me to recommend these things even. And I will never for the life of me recommend Brave. What I would recommend to most people most of the time is to just use Chrome. Chrome is fine. And if you are particularly sensitive to Google having access to data, ungoogled Chrome is also totally fine. And if you want to be on the bleeding edge a little bit, and you're okay with Firefox, and you want the fun UX of the sidebar and whatnot, Zen is a really nice browser. It is the most pleasant browsing experience I've ever had until you hit the Firefox quirks. And if you want like an obsessively detailed Chromium fork, you're willing to deal with some rough edge cases and the fact that it is as new as it is. I'm liking Helium a lot, but it is very, very, very early. I'm not even going to link it in the description. If you can't find it yourself, it's not for you. It's totally fine. When it is ready, you'll get a dedicated video, believe me. But I cannot recommend that you use something by the browser company when I know for a fact that half the people in this picture aren't going to be there in 2 years because they cannot hit product market fit in their current path. Just think about how insane it is to have this many employees for this many years with $0 in revenue. And you'll know how this one's going to go. I don't know what else I have to say. I think I'm just out. Curious what you guys think. Sorry for the absurd rant, but it's been an absurd project. It's been an absurd journey, and I am absurdly sorry. I never expected Arc to explode in the way that it did. And as much as I want to say I told you so, I'm really just sad. Let me know what you guys think. Until next time, peace, nerds.